Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Rarity, Pinkie Pie, Ditzy, Luna and more Anthro ponies. Part 5. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. With Rarity done, it was time for them to move on to the next pony to interview. Having had to work out everyone's schedule because of their career, there were only certain points in the day that each of them could be interviewed. As such, that meant Rainbow Dash would be the next to be interviewed, considering that maintaining the weather patterns for a small town like Ponyville could be handled with a well-trained team in a matter of a few hours if they get started early enough. With her usual energy and enthusiasm, Rainbow Dash strolled into the library and took her seat. So Rainbow Dash, you ready for the interview? Of course I am. Now all my adoring fans can finally have some of the answers to their questions answered. Rainbow Dash answered as she began to go into her own fantasy. The ponies in our head aren't real, Rain. They are figments of your emo. Naruto found himself cut off as a quick slap from Rainbow's wings cut off the verbal jab before it could be finished. Twilight looked rather alarmed at what happened, but Naruto merely turned to face her, clutching the back of his head as he grinned. Rain hitting me is just another one of our little jokes. Rain here likes to beat up on poor defenseless stallions like myself who can't defend themselves. He playfully teased as Rainbow Dash folded her arms and snorted. Defenseless, my right flank. She shot back at the stallion as Twilight was alarmed again, this time by the use of the Pegasus language. Considering that Twilight was rather educated and thought of herself as an amateur scholar, she never found herself using such terms or forms of slang. Loudly, Twilight cleared her throat to gain their attention. Right, the interview? You ready, Rain? Whenever you're ready, Rainbow Dash shrugged coolly. Now the first question we have is, do you have any nicknames or aliases that you use? Maybe for your career or for any other professional or personal reasons. Besides Dash and Rain, not really. I don't have much need for false names or nothing like that. Twilight made a note of the nicknames. What about your date of birth? August 17, 2001 AD. Keep them coming. Now your height. As soon as the question left Twilight's lips, Rainbow Dash's face tightened into a scowl. Part of the questioning, Rain. He stated to the Pegasus, hoping that Rainbow Dash wouldn't let the review fall into a somber experience because of the sore spot. 5'7". She murmured as she suddenly found the table interesting. Twilight looked up from her pad and met with Naruto. Sensitive about her height. He whispered to her, to which Twilight nodded in understanding. Okay, Rainbow, we're moving on to the next question. How much do you weigh? 121 pounds, this time Rainbow Dash answered a bit more lively. This time Naruto spoke up. Okay, would you be willing to identify your cute mark for us? He asked, hoping that Rainbow Dash wouldn't take this opportunity for one of her lewd jokes. Unfortunately, Naruto knew her all too well. Well, it's a tri-colored thunderbolt with the colors of red, blue, and yellow inside, said Thunderbolt. Rainbow Dash took the opportunity to stand up and pull down her pants, enough to flash the blonde. Been dying to see this for a while, right? She finished with a wink as Naruto blushed furiously and looked away. The faint blush dusted Twilight's cheeks as she felt like she was intruding on something rather personal. I'm pretty sure Twilight doesn't want to see your plot, Rain. Would you quit messing around? He said as Rainbow Dash retorted with a raspberry. Meh, you're no fun. Naruto was inwardly cursing the sun goddess known as Celestia and considering creating a faction in the name of Luna to praise her name. Surely Luna was not a pony who was an infamous prank puller, right? We need a moan escaped Naruto's lips as he clasped his face with his right hand. What Naruto is trying to say is your measurements are needed to answer the next question. Twilight explained as her focus now seemed glued to her notepad. I don't know, Twilight, a smirk adorned Naruto's lips. Seems less like questions for the princess and more like one. Don't you finish that statement, Miss Little Sunshine. Naruto interrupted her with a verbal jab whose meaning went over Twilight's head. Whatever that meant, it was enough to make Rainbow Dash blush and Naruto to grin triumphantly. Twilight was sure of one thing. Their friends were weird. Alright, as for my measurements, 32C for my bust, 26 inches for my waist, and 36 for my hips. Really odd question if you ask me. But those out of the way, Twilight cut in. Now to ask you some questions about your education. Rainbow Dash's postures physically changed upon hearing that, going as far as going stiff. I don't want to talk about that, go on to the next question. Twilight was about to bring up a question as to why Rainbow Dash didn't want to mention that when Naruto cut her off. Your occupation then? Head of the Ponyville Weather Patrol, right? Rainbow Dash nodded as she flashed the blonde a grateful smile. Despite being a bit miffed at something like education being glossed over, Twilight decided to respect the mayor's wishes. Economic status? I do pretty well. I mean the pay is your average weather captain salary, so it's decent enough to live off of, but I don't expect to be taking any lavish vacations or nothing like that anytime soon. Not to mention I live in a cloud home, so that's pretty convenient in terms of not having to worry about most of the taxes and such that comes with a house. Are there any illnesses, allergies, or injuries in your medical history? Rainbow Dash leaned back in her chair and began tapping her chin. Well, there was that wing injury I had a week ago. Busted a few ribs a few months ago. Oh, there was the time I smashed my hand, and let me tell you something that really sucked. Rainbow Dash spent the next few minutes listing off her rather accident-prone injuries. As for any serious illnesses or allergies, nothing came to mind for the mayor. Now, is there any event in your history that deals with any possible criminal activity or crimes committed? No, definitely not. Rainbow Dash answered seriously and decisively. She then shot a glance at Naruto. Hey Twi, don't take this the wrong way or anything, but you think I can talk to Naruto alone for this next part? You're my friend and all, but it's really kind of personal, you know. Rainbow Dash softly pleaded. A bit concerned, Twilight had to stop herself from asking what it was. If it was personal enough that Rainbow Dash didn't feel like sharing with her at the moment, she didn't have much choice but to respect her wishes. Oh, okay. Call me back when you finish the discussion of that particular topic then. Thanks, only take about 10 minutes top. Rainbow Dash promised as Twilight merely nodded, got up, and decided to head into the kitchen to make something. By the time Twilight returned, she couldn't help but notice Naruto made some notes on his past, and she got a glimpse of the first few letters, flig, to which Twilight wondered if the incident she didn't feel like talk about had to deal with flying. Either way, it didn't matter as Naruto asked her what question they were going with next, bringing their focus back to the interview, which was still ongoing. Finally, it was going on near 2 p.m. when they finally finished. Is there anything else you wish to know? Twilight finished writing down what she needed to before smiling. Well, then. That's all. Thank you for the time. Hopefully the next time we have this little get-together it won't take as long. Rainbow Dash stood up and yawned, stretching both her arms and wings. That entire interview sucked the energy out of me. Yeah, go find a cloud to laze on, Naruto said as Rainbow Dash nearly stuck her tongue out at the blonde before saying goodbye and taking flight outside of the library. With the prism mare done, that left 3 more to go. Naruto, Pinkie Pie, and Twilight were in the park. Pinkie Pie was excitedly describing some of the stunts she saw Rainbow Dash do the other day, while Naruto watched in interest, while Twilight was absorbed into her latest book. The latest project with Naruto and his scrolls had sparked Twilight's latest hoof-biting action overload. The pink earth pony was saying. She was like a stunt superstar, flying higher and higher, and then Rainbow Dash swooped down, swoosh. She zipped off, then hopped back. And right before she hit the ground, shoom. She floated while doing this and then landed on her hooves. She pulled up. Vroom. Yuh. Twilight wasn't paying attention as she replied. Come on Twilight, don't you think it's a bit rude to ignore our friend? You'll never know when you might end up missing important information a friend is telling you if you're only half listening, he whispered to the mayor, who looked up, was about to make up an excuse, but realized he was right. She closed the book, realizing how rude she was being. And then she looped around and around, like woo 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 woo. She mimicked the action with her head, eventually becoming so dizzy that she collapsed to the ground. The pink mare wound up on her back, giving her a good view of Rainbow Dash soaring overhead. Upon seeing the Pegasus, she bounded up and raced after the blue flyer. Well, so much for that. Naruto murmured as he shook his head. Guess Pinkie found something more interesting to do. Well, she certainly is excitable. I cannot say I have ever met any pony with as much enthusiasm as I have her. Anyway, when I suggested we go to the park, I didn't mean go to the park to continue to read. He deadpanned as Twilight was slowly once more giving in to the temptation of words. Well, considering the current temperature and humidity, this is the perfect kind of climate to take in some knowledge. What about for the sake of exercise? A healthy body can contribute to a healthy mind after all. I do plenty of calisthenics, she argued, only for Naruto to burst out laughing. Hey. What's so funny? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but that's it. I mean, I suppose I shouldn't knock it considering with the way you look they seem to be doing their job. Twilight's expression made Naruto chuckle. What? Never been complimented before. Considering how much of a social loner she was when it came to the concept of friends, she definitely had no experience when it came to dating. With the exception of her school uniform, the outfits she wore were practical and kept her covered up, so she was often dismissed as bookish or unflattering, with most her clothing being fit and loose. There was one exception, but Twilight didn't like to think about him. Not really. Not a compliment that was appropriate or that I care to repeat. She said as she remembered some of the rather derogative catcalls she had received during her days at the academy. Then those colts were disgusting. You are an amazing mare who doesn't deserve to be treated to such things. The blush on Twilight's cheeks darkened under the compliment. "Thank you," she replied, trying to suppress that weird fluttering feeling in her stomach. The sound of the town's bell going off alerted Naruto to the time. "Sorry, I have to go. I have to go see if my permit is ready." "Permit?" Twilight asked, curious on what Naruto planned on buying. "Yeah, I won't be able to survive forever off doing odd jobs, and I thought about what service I could offer the town that couldn't be easily replicated, and I decided to open up a dojo. There's only a handful of ponies in this town really capable of defending themselves, and I've been hearing reports of bandit activity as close as 10 miles away from town." Twilight's eyes opened in alarm. The average bandit camps usually kept a distance of 20 or maybe even 15 miles away from towns, especially those that were near a major city like Canterlot. It was the fact that Ponyville was one of the nations near the nation's capital that incidents like raids were practically unheard of. "That's why I decided to purchase a plot of land, my permits, and whatever else I'm going to need. This is going to set me back a good deal though. Even if I went to gemstone hunting with Rarity, it'll take me weeks. I'm going to have to figure out a way to earn some more bits." "Well, I wish you luck then. Fluttershy's interview is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. she quickly added, reminding the stallion. "Alright, see you then," Naruto remarked as he began making his way onto downtown. As Naruto continued his way, he ran into Pinkie Pie, who was moving at near breakneck speeds. From the looks of it, she must have still been chasing Rainbow Dash. "Hi there Naruto, have you seen Rainbow Dash?" she asked as the blonde simply pointed up and at a diagonal angle at the cloud hovering near the library. "Naruto, you traitor. We're supposed to be bros," Rainbow Dash cried out from the cloud. "Consider it payback for the teasing. After all, one's bro has been known to pull jokes on their bros from to time." "Rainbow Dash," Pinkie cried out in a sing-song manner. Up came the striped mane, a wisp of cloud adhering to it over a truly freaked out face. She looked one way, then another, and took off with enough speed to nearly pulverize the rest of the cloud, leaving only a few tufts. Pinkie, completely unfazed, began hopping along the road after her at a leisurely pace. Naruto shook his head and went to town hall. After signing some documents and paying the fee, he began making his way to his home to store away the permit and copy of the document that lists him as the owner of a plot of land. He was going to have to figure out times he can do demonstrations in the park and drew attention while he would be waiting for the arrival of construction material. Passing by Golden Oaks, he heard Pinkie Pie's voice. "Over to the right. No, a little to the left. Oh, wait. Back to the right." Naruto started up, and sure enough, he could see Rainbow Dash was adjusting the position of a nearby cloud. Pinkie Pie was nearby, working her hands around through several angles, squinting her eyes as well. Apparently, the two were up to something, and Rainbow's patience was wearing thin. Now, a little leftish while staying rightly. The assistant did her best to follow this one. Stop. Maybe a few inches to the south. Now a couple of centimeters north. Okay, one more smidge a meter to the. Rainbow Dash then lost it. Pinkie Pie. Perfect. Now, wait for my signal. The cloud had ended up almost exactly above the front doors. Pinkie then peeked through a window. Spike then exited the pavilion, whereupon Pinkie threw a quick gesture skyward. Rainbow proceeded to give the cloud a swift buck, causing a sudden flash of lightning that frightened Spike into dropping his scrolls before starting to hiccup. Rainbow smiled and Pinkie laughed as the cloud brought the former down to the ground. Naruto couldn't help but murmur wow at what he witnessed. You could startle someone into getting the hiccups. He was going to have to remember that. "Oh, Rainbow Dash, we startled Spike into getting the hiccups," Pinkie said. Every pony laughed with her. "Good one, Pinkie Pie," the baby dragon replied in between hiccups. "You're always pulling a fast one on me." He then picked up one of the scrolls, but hiccuped a lick of fire over it and yelped in surprise. It vanished in a wisp of sparkling pink smoke. "Oh, that can't be good," Naruto murmured as he realized Spike just sent a message to Princess Celestia by mistake. "Oh, no," Pinkie gasped. "You're not hurt, are you?" "Nah," Spike hiccuped. "Don't be silly. Dragons are fireproof." "Oh, okay. Good." She and Rainbow then traded a smile and started laughing again while Spike rounded up several other scrolls. Another incendiary hiccup burnt the lot and left him staring haplessly after the inadvertent mass mailing. "I wish the same thing were true of scrolls. I'll tell you one thing," Naruto said in between his laughter. "I'm glad I took all my scrolls home yesterday." "Be a good thing indeed," Spike said as he quickly went over all the scrolls only for his eyes to widen briefly. "Ah, Tartarus. Have you ever seen anything more hilarious?" Pinkie asked before falling back laughing. Rainbow gave a wicked smile. "I can think of one thing. That one thing was to kick the cloud for another lightning flash." Naruto, being used to this sort of thing from Rainbow, quickly jumped away from it, but it was sufficient to startle Pinkie, and it left her with the hiccups as well. She started alternating between these and giggles. "I didn't take you for a prankster, Pinkie Pie." "Yeah, well, that's because you aren't her usual target," Naruto remarked with a pout. "Yeah, well, you usually deserve it," Rainbow Dash countered as Naruto made a dismissive hand gesture, saying bye before he went on his way. He decided to go find Fluttershy. Considering most of the products she used were homemade, she would be the perfect pony to turn to for items made out of nature. As the Pegasus flew down, the Earth Mare had stood up. "Are you kidding? I love to pull pranks. It's all in good fun, and Pinkie Pie love to have fun," she said in between her hiccups. "You know, Pinkie Pie, you're not as annoying as I thought." Pinkie gave out another hiccup. "You want to hang out?" As she spoke, she was cut off with hiccups as she was sent flying all over the place. "That'd be, I'd really, when would you?" Rainbow then stopped her with a hand over the mouth. "A simple nod will do." Pinkie complied and the two conspirators then smiled at each other. The following morning Naruto was on a mission. He was going to find out Spike and find out the exact contents of that letter he sent. His face flushed with anger and embarrassment, he recalled the message delivered to him by Celestia. "I have to say, Naruto, I never took you for a poet. I am rather flattered by your words, seeing as I did not have the faintest idea you felt that way about me, but I digress. The situation with Equestria and bonding with Luna again is taking all my focus. Please do not be heartbroken that I cannot return your feelings. I am sure you will be able to find a nice filly or two in Ponyville. Your friend forever, Princess Celestia. P.S. That face you're making is quite adorable." The worst part was there was a tiny gem embedded in the top of the letter, most likely transmitting the expression on Naruto's face. Whether or not that was the case Naruto didn't know, but he was more than sure Celestia could imagine his face at the conclusion of this letter and laughing in triumph. Naruto was still deciding whether or not, if he could back in time, that he would stop himself from pranking Celestia or pranking her 3 times as hard. Either way, this war of pranking will not end in his loss. His pride would not allow it to. But that he walked into the library. "Twilight, is Spike here? I need to talk with him," he called out. Spike, alarmed, shot up the stairs before he could be seen. "Are you sure that this friend of Rainbow Dash is really so mean?" Naruto was about to make his presence known when he caught sight of Pinkie Pie and Twilight talking. Apparently whatever they were engrossed in was interesting enough that they didn't hear him. Yeah," Pinkie replied as she continued to pace. "She keeps stealing Rainbow Dash away, she popped my balloons, and she told me to buzz off. I've never met a griffin this mean. Well, actually, I've never met a griffin at all. But I bet if I had, she wouldn't have been as mean and grumpy as Gilda." "You know what I think, Pinkie Pie?" Twilight suggested as she didn't look up from her book. Well, I think you're jealous." "Jealous?" Pinkie Pie exclaimed incredulously. "Listen, Pinkie. I don't want to upset you, but just because Rainbow Dash has another friend doesn't make Gilda a grump. I mean, perhaps it's you, Pinkie, who needs to improve her attitude." "Improve my attitude?" Pinkie said, stammering. But it's Gilda that. Are you serious?" She then gave up on the discussion with a frustrated yell and stalked out, slamming the library door hard enough to shake the whole building. Twilight sighed as she looked up, surprised that Naruto was there. "Oh, hello, Naruto. When did you get here?" At the tail end of the conversation. He answered as he glanced where Pinkie Pie had stormed out. "Are you sure you're right, Twilight? I don't think I've seen Pinkie ever react quite like that. She was complaining about Rainbow Dash being stolen away and her balloons being popped. Quite honestly, it sounds like she's being rather clingy. Pinkie can have a hard time expressing what she really means when she's worked up. I mean, there has to be something more to what she just said. I don't know about you, but I'm going to look into the situation more." Even if Pinkie Pie was the kind of mare to take offense to something like a balloon being popped, she was more likely to confront the pony or griffin or something of another about being mean about it than going to complain to someone else. Naruto decided to hurry after and track Pinkie down. "Look, I'll see you later, there's something I have to look into." "Okay, I'll see you later," Twilight answered, a look of confusion displayed on her face. He finally tracked her down as she was walking along the path. Something was definitely on Pinkie's mind if she wasn't traveling with her trademark skip. "Oh, hey Naruto." She greeted him somberly. "Hey Pinkie, look, I don't know what's going on, but this thing with Rain's friend is obviously bothering you. So why don't you tell me about it?" he asked as Pinkie Pie relented with a smile. "Okay." The two of them went to a restaurant and ordered lunch as Pinkie Pie began telling Naruto what happened. "I think I can understand why Twilight accused you of being jealous." He began as Pinkie Pie began to visibly deflate, but there was no excuse for Gilda's actions. The type of callousness she displayed could have seriously injured you, or if you guys were even higher in the air, even worse. She definitely needs an attitude adjustment, but to get back to the point, I do have to admit Pink's as fond as you are of Rainbow Dash, you got to give her some space. Remind you of anything? He asked as Pinkie Pie paused and began thinking about why this conversation seemed so familiar. Her eyes practically lit up as to why this seemed so familiar. Naruto had always been more receptive of Pinkie's action, so they had developed a bond of sorts. As much as he enjoyed being around her, he did one day simply told her he needed some time to himself to enjoy some peace and quiet from time to time. Right, I understand. Initially Pinkie Pie was afraid that once more with her enthusiasm, she had scared off yet another potential best friend, but was relieved that the stallion continued to spend time with her. Just then, the sound of an overhead flight and two unmistakable laughing voices caused Pinkie to nearly upset both the table and her drink. Naruto just looked up to see two familiar faces. That was sweet. So that's Gilda. Naruto thought as he got a good look at her. Like the equine of this world, she was bipedal with a wide beak. The head of the griffin was white, the feathers around her eyes were a pale lavender color, while her eyes were a bright golden color. The feathers which hung from her head were white with pale purple tips. She wore a shirt which was tied on her. She wore a plain white sleeveless tank top and skinny denim shorts. Sure enough, the rest of the brown furred visitor was lying from body to tail with an eagle's wings and talons on her forelegs. Sorry Gil, but I'll be right back. Got to take care of a few weather jobs in the area and I shouldn't take long. They then landed on the ground. Just, hang out in town and I'll come find you. That's cool, I guess. I'm gonna go chow down. Later. After Rainbow has flown away, Gilda looked around and then locked her eyes on a produce cart tended to by a stallion. Granny Smith was coming over to check out ears of corn. Naruto then saw the griffin sneak into the cart and pop out her tail from the display, prompting a terrified scream from the old mare. A rattler. A rattler. Granny yelled. Run for the hills. She proceeded to flee quickly, as her creaky joints will allow, that is, not very. Everybody run, save yourselves. Gilda then put her head up behind the display to see her handiwork. I can't believe she did that to Granny Smith. Amethyst spoke up, appalled at what happened. Most of the younger generation of Ponyville considered and treated the matriarch of the Apple family like their own grandmother. If you ask around town, Granny Smith was known as one of the most beloved and respected pillars of the community. How could anyone have such ghastly behavior? This time it was Sweetie Drops who spoke up, known by her close friends as Bone Bone, due to the fact she was the local owner of the town's candy shop. Bone Bone was some pony more often or not was known for two things. Her delicious candy and her crankiness. Then again, when you were the favored target of lot of the town's crazy antics, you would be a bit cranky too. Despite that, she really was a sweetheart at heart. Today she was dressed in a pink and white striped shirt with the design of her cutie mark on it, wrapped candies. She was also wearing navy blue slips and a long navy skirt. Her mane and tail colors were moderate cobalt blue with fuchsia stripes. Her eyes moderate arctic blue and her coat a light greenish gray apple. In terms of her stature, Bone Bone was a bit on the shorter side, coming out at 5'5", and which gave her more of a stocky look. Considering the tension between our two species, she could show a bit of tact. Bone Bone added a bit stuffily. This stuff ain't fresh, dude. Gilda continued to harass the stall vendor. How could she pull off something like that on an older pony? She could have had a health complication like a heart attack. There is no defending behavior like that. Just then, Gilda stopped at another produce cart. With a quick look back and forth, the griffin filched an apple using her tail without being noticed, and then quickly consumed it with one chomp as she continued on. By that no good rot, Naruto began to get up where Pinkie Pie stopped him. We should just go wait and find Rainbow Dash. If we confront her now, it might make things worse. Just then, they saw Fluttershy walking backwards, her eyes fixed on a family of ducks she was escorting down the street. All right, little ones. She said, this way, this way. Mama Duck, you're free and clear. She was completely clueless to what was happening. Fluttershy. Shy. Naruto and Pinkie Pie cried out, while the other surrounding ponies merely watched from where they stood, not even trying to warn her of Gilda's approach. Fluttershy helped snapped up, startled by the cry of her name, only to collide with the avian woman. Hey. The griffin demanded. Please excuse me. Fluttershy softly apologized as she nervously fidgeted, her eyes darted away from the taller woman. I'm walking here. Gilda rudely added. Frightened Fluttershy began to back up. Oh I'm sorry, I was just trying to, she nervously stammered. Gilda cut her off and mocked her tone. I'm sorry. She then viciously advanced as the ducks scattered. Why don't you just watch where you're going, you featherbrain? But I. Gilda began taking a big inhale. Fluttershy's eyes widened in terror, her ears plastered to the back of her head, her body frozen. Don't you dare. The coldness of the statement caused Gilda to double take. Who the hell are you? This has nothing to do with you. stood tall and flexed her wings attempting to look rather imposing. When you mess with those I care about it has everything to do with me. So if you wish to walk away just turn around and walk away. You think you can take me on? Please, I'll tear right through you like paper, she threatened as she raised one of her paws. You leave them alone you bully. Amethyst shouted as she went over to join Naruto. You have some nerve coming into our town thinking you can do whatever you want. Amethyst. He supposed he shouldn't be surprised, Aim was always rather headstrong. If you think we're going to let you cause trouble then you simply are a fool. Bone joined Naruto on her left. Several other ponies began coming out and shouting similar sentiments. It was at that moment Naruto realized that despite the incident with Trixie, a great deal of these ponies was still kind-hearted and one incident shouldn't completely color his perception. Whatever, I'm not going to waste my time on you emotional saps. Hila snarled as she flew off. Suddenly, every pony in the market started cheering, Naruto a little overwhelmed at the turnout, still smiled appreciatively as he waved them all off and turned to Fluttershy, still shaking. Are you alright? Fluttershy's eyes were streaming with tears, but she nodded. Naruto gently wiped them away, saying, it's alright Shy she's gone. No matter what I'm always there for you. Thank you Fluttershy whimpered as Naruto gently helped her up. That was amazing Nary. Pinkie Pie cheered. You okay Fluttershy? She turned to the mayor who simply nodded. Gilda is not only a meanie but a thief and there's only one way to fix that. Naruto and Fluttershy listened intently as Pinkie Pie began explaining the details of her plan. Later that night Pinkie's party was in full swing. As always Pinkie's party was teeming with the life of multiple ponies. Who's this Gilda I heard nothing about? Applejack asked Rarity. I hear she's an old friend of Rainbow Dash, a griffin. So rare. You've met Gilda, right? Twilight Sparkle asked Fluttershy, who seemed to be feeling better. What's she like? Oh well I'll tell you later, Twilight. The yellow Pegasus then approached Pinkie as Minuet and Golden Harvest were greeted. Welcome. Pinkie greeted. Welcome. Pinkie Pie, about this party for Gilda do you really think it's a good idea? I mean. Don't worry your pretty little head about mean old Gilda. Pinkie cut her off and gave her a side hug. Your auntie Pinkie Pie's got it all taken care of. She failed to notice that her response had left Pinkie rather vexed and she turned back toward the door without bothering to hear her response. I'm a year older than you. The Pegasus remarked annoyed. Just then, Gilda entered and Pinkie jumped over to greet her. Gilda. I'm so honored to throw you one of my signature Pinkie Pie parties. Well, it's also a welcome party for some pony else. But anyway, I really, truly, sincerely hope you feel welcome here amongst all us pony folk. Pinkie then held out a hand and gave a big grin. Gilda reluctantly shook the hand and received a full-body electric shock that sent the griffin tottering to the floor and put an even bigger grin on the pink pony's face. Sure enough a joy buzzer attached to Pinkie's hand as she laughed over the stunt and Gilda got upright with a scowl. Rainbow Dash also laughed as she trotted over to the pair. Oh, Pinkie Pie. She said. The old hoofshake buzzer. You are a scream. Gilda forced a smile and chuckled. Yeah. Good one, Pinkie Pie. Rainbow began to trot off. Come on, gee. I'll introduce you to some of my other friends. Right behind you, Dash. Once the Pegasus was out of earshot, the griffin turned to Pinkie menacingly. I know what you're up to. Pinkie was still smiling. Great. Gilda gave an exasperated groan. I know what you're planning. Pinkie just giggled. Well, I hope so. This wasn't supposed to be a surprise party. Well, not for you, anyway. I mean, I've got my eye on you. Pinkie then leaned directly into her face. And I got my eye on you. At this line, she bulged her eyes out comically on this line, then backed off to leave one rather bemused bad girl standing alone. Now standing amid the crowd, Pinkie announced, everyone, I'd like you all to meet Gilda, a long-time dear friend of Rainbow Dash. She then zoomed in to hug her. Let's honor her and welcome her to Ponyville. As she zipped away, Gilda shot a hairy eyeball after her, but quickly traded it in for a smile as the other guests cheered and Rainbow Dash threw an arm around her shoulders. So I brought the vanilla lemon drops. Naruto remarked as he walked up with a bowl of candy. Yo bro. Rainbow Dash started as she threw her fist forward. Let's go. Naruto finished as they fist bumped. So this is your childhood friend. He offered up a bowl. Candy. Gilda repressed the urge to snarl, seeing the look on the lawn. Try some Gila, sweetie drops make some of the best candy I ever tasted. Rainbow Dash insisted. Gilda picked up one with her talons. Don't mind if I do. At the same time, both Griffin and Pegasus tossed their snacks into their mouths. Instantly, Gilda squinted her entire face up in pain as her face reddened and visible perspiration seeped out of her feathers. Hot. Gilda gasped. Gee. Rainbow called out. The punch. Gilda raced past her and took a full glass from one of the tables. She then gulped it hastily, or so she thought. As it turned out, the punch was leaking out of a hole in the glass. There were laughs from every pony. "Well, what do you know?" Pinkie said. "Pepper and the vanilla lemon drops, and the punch served in a dribble glass." Rainbow chuckled. "That's a rather devilish combination if I do say so myself." She laughed as Gilda zipped across the room and successfully downed another glass, gasping for breath. "Yeah. Hilarious," Gilda said sarcastically. "Hey, gee." Rainbow called out as she stood by a table stacked with gifts. "Look. Presents." Breed brought the griffin over in an instant. The griffin grabbed one and pulled its ribbon with her beak, only to have it disappear in an explosion of magical smoke which left Gilda dazed and disheveled. There was more laughter from every pony in the party. "Fake magical can," Applejack said to Rarity. "Some pony pulled that prank on me last month." "Ha, ha." Gilda sarcastically laughed. "I bet I know who that was." "You do?" Pinkie asked, surprised, oblivious to the fact that she was who Gilda was referring to. The party seemed to continue on without much incident. Just then, Pinkie Pie came over with a cake loaded with lit candles. "Cake time, every pony," she said as she pushed the cake on a wheeled platform to the center of the floor. Spike, who was late to the party because of some errands for Twilight, walked up to it. "Hey. Can I blow out the candles?" he asked. "Why don't we let Gilda blow out the candles, Spike?" Twilight suggested. "She is the guest of honor, after all," said Griffin, then flashed over, elbowing Spike away, her feathers back in order. "Exactly." She then took a deep breath, blew out all the candles, and then is greatly perplexed to see them all relight themselves. Another try left her slightly winded and earned a round of laughs when the wicks blazed back up. Several more attempts got the same result. "Relighting birthday candles." Spike laughed. "I love that prank. What a classic. Now I wonder who could have done that," Pinkie asked herself. "Yeah. I wonder," snarled Gilda. "Hey, gee," Rainbow began, "you're not upset about some silly candles, are you?" Gilda compassed herself. "No way, Like I said, I'm down with a good prank." Rainbow then zipped right over to it. "Come on, then. Let's have some cake." Naruto quietly chortled as he watched the events unfold, walking over to join the bears. "Hey, y'all," Applejack called. "It's Pin the Tail on the pony." The two turned to see that she's near the door. A paper ponytail lay before her, and a drawing of the tailless animal was tacked up on the wall. "Let's play." "Oh, my favorite party game," Rarity stated with a look of wistful as she remembered the parties of her youth. "Can I go first? Can I have the purple tail?" Gilda leaped for it and quickly snatched it up. "I am the guest of honor, and I'll have the purple tail," she said. "Yeah." Pinkie agreed. "Gilda should definitely go first." Naruto then produced a blindfold and walked over. "Let's get you blindfolded." "Hey." Gilda protested as Naruto tied the cloth over her eyes and jumped off her back. "What are you doing?" She then gave a snarl as Pinkie grabbed hold of her and gave a heave that set her spinning, and then backed away. "We're spinning you around and around, and then you can pin the tail on the pony," Naruto explained as if it was the most simply thing in the world. Once Gilda stopped spinning, feeling giddy, Pinkie guided the griffin right to the tail. "Now just walk straight ahead and pin the tail. Now just walk straight ahead and pin the tail." Gilda parroted mockingly and then gave a snort. "Yeah, right. This is another prank, isn't it?" She then walked away from wall. "I'm going this way." "Wait. The poster is this." Before the warning could be finished, one talon foot came down in a splotch of frosting to send Gilda skidding and yelling across the room, straight through the bat-wing doors leading into what was apparently the kitchen. The resulting crash shook the entire house, and as clouds of flour puffed out, Gilda emerged a weary, bleary wreck, smeared with cake and various other sweet stuff. The blindfold was off, and the tail hung across her beak like a mustache. Gilda." Pinkie attempted to make a joke. "You pinned the tail on the wrong end." The ensuing round of laughter was the very last straw for the luckless griffin, who threw off all the gunk with a bellowing roar and hovered above the crowd. "This is your idea of a good time?" she cried out. "I've never met a pitiful bunch of sad sacks in all my life. And Pinkie Pie, you." She pointed in Pinkie's face and then leaned to her. "You are an annoying and worthless splotch of mud with your weak little party pranks. Did you really think you could make me lose my cool?" She then slid to Rainbow "Well, and I have 10 times as much cool as the rest of you put together." She failed to notice her friend's face hardens. "Come on, Gilda walked to the door. "We're bailing on this pathetic scene." The Pegasus did not stir a step even as her old friend stopped at the door. "Come on, Rainbow I said, we're leaving." Not a single face was smiling anymore, not even Pinkie. "You know, Gilda, I was the one who set up all those weak pranks at this party." This proved to be a direct hit to Gilda. "What? Boo," Pinkie said. So I guess that makes me the worthless splotch of mud as you so eloquently put it. Those who knew Rainbow Dash were a bit unnerved by how calm the Pegasus was being. Hot-blooded described her to a T considering how eager she was usual to jump into anything, whether it is a fight or argument, but this was something different. Come on, Dash. You're joshing me. Gilda tried to gloss over the near slur. They weren't all meant for you specifically. It was just dumb luck that you set them all off. No way. Gilda was in denial. It was Pinkie Pie. She set up this party to trip me up, to make a fool of me. Pinkie seemed to be genuinely surprised at this. Me? I threw this party to improve your attitude. She then turned her head until her face was upside down. I thought a good party might turn that frown upside down. And you sure didn't need any help making a fool of yourself. Rainbow added. You know, this is not how I thought my old friend would treat my new friends. You know, when Sweetie Drops told me what happened in the market, I immediately began making excuses for you. I tried to explain that being a griffin you were probably raised with an anti-equine bias because of our history and that you were acting out of pride, which you weren't cruel, but now I realize I was being blind. When Naruto approached me and told me Pinkie Pie was throwing you a party I thought that you could get past that part of yourself, but now I realized it was more than that. All you care about is what you can get out of others and feeding your own ego. If you aren't willing to make an effort and accept my friends and make amends for what you've done, then I have nothing else to say to you. The recipient of this tongue-lashing snarled to herself and spread her wings. Yeah. Well to Tartarus to you then. You think I care? I don't need you anyway. The door was slammed and her shrill cry was heard to mark her departure. Sentiments of good riddance were shared among the general partygoers. Rainbow Dash turned to address Everpony at the party. I'm sorry, Everpony, for bringing Gilda here. I didn't know how rude she was. And, Pinkie Pie, I'm really sorry she ruined that awesome party you put on for her. Pinkie just gave a smile. Hey, if you want to hang out with party poopers, that's your business. I'd rather hang out with you. Rainbow then held out hoof to shake. No hard feelings. No hard feelings. The moment they shook, both of them got a jolt that started the whole crowd laughing, and the two pranksters joined in, turning over their hooves to reveal a joy buzzer on each. Hey Pinkie. Twilight said as she walked over. Sorry I accused you of misjudging Gilda. Looks like I'm the one who misjudged you. Thinking back to Naruto's words earlier she realized if she took what he said more faithfully, this could have been avoided. Twilight decided she was going to pay more attention to what others said now to avoid this kind of situation. Pinkie put a foreleg around her shoulders. It's okay, Twilight. Every pony makes their mistakes. Pinkie then turned to the crowd. Come on, every pony. There's still a whole lot of party to finish. We still got Mystic Shield as our guest of honor. There was laughter and cheers as Twilight gave a thoughtful smile, ideas for her next letter already underway. The party soon went by and every pony soon went on their way. Wishing all the others good night Naruto began making his way home which to his surprise Rainbow Dash was waiting for him. Rain? What are you doing here? There's something I need to do. The prismatic mare walked over to Naruto who simply gave her a curious look. Suddenly she embraced the blonde pulling into him a warm and heartfelt hug. Naruto found himself speechless as throughout the entire time he knew Rainbow Dash, they had never shared something like a hug. Soon the gesture ended. I heard what you also did for Fluttershy. Thank you. Even if she would never admit it, Rainbow always had a soft spot for Fluttershy. The best way to get in good with Rainbow Dash was to be nice to the other mare. She's my friend too, I wasn't going to let anyone bully her. Right, either way I guess it's time for me to turn in. I have work early tomorrow, take care of yourself okay. Rainbow Dash gave off a wave as she took to the air. Yeah, you too Rain. Naruto bid her farewell as he went inside his home. The location was a barren waste field lacking life in any direction. The soil was lifeless, a dull sickly green color, and the trees lacking any matter of plant life. In the spot of the field stood Nightmare Moon's second command at a makeshift podium. On the podium was a spell book to which she was flipping through. Midnight, you have nerve ordering me to meet you here. With a slow descent to the ground, the feisty strutter waited the dark unicorn. The which you answer, as is common with a mare of your temperament. Midnight cruelly taunted back at the mare without so much as making a move to acknowledge the other mare as a threat. Hot Streak balled up her fist and wings flexed as she prepared to strike only for Midnight to toss back an arm and fire a blast of magic, just short of where the Pegasus was standing, the blast having left the ground singed and decaying. You would do well to remember such insubordination runs counter to our cause. What cause? Nightmare Moon was defeated and Celestia is back on the throne. Hot Streak noted. Her Majesty, Midnight corrected, is not yet gone. We have two important components that can still be used to resurrect her. The remnants of her armor that were blown off from that night and retrieved by her guard and the Alicorn amulet can be used to restore her. Her Majesty prior to her purification used the last of her power to send me the amulet, it's the only explanation for how it arrived to my possession. Speaking of which, where were you? It's funny that you up and disappeared when we were fighting against Celestia's servants. Do not presume to question my loyalty, Midnight spoke in a cold whisper. My hands were full directed our forces, to which most of them lacked the formal training to have been usual against the Sun Tyrant soldiers. Look, whatever, and say we resurrect Nightmare Moon and then what? What's to stop her from being blasted from the elements again? We made the mistake of assuming that Celestia was the only threat, but we now know who to target. We now have an idea on who we need to eliminate. The bearer of the 6 elements, without them the elements of harmony will be useless. And you think you can turn Princess Luna back into Nightmare Moon? No, Luna is a whipped mongrel at the heels of her sister. A weakness we will remove from Her Majesty in the form of a fresh body, but in the meantime we need to study the strength and weaknesses of the bearers. Alright, so why call me here? You have a plan, right? Indeed, I have a plan for magic. One of our agents is taking time to observe the others to give us more intel to go on. From what I understand you would like a second shot at the mare known as Rainbow Dash, correct? This piqued Hotstreak's attention. I'm listening. In the Ponyville area today was a contrast from the usual clear and sunny days that followed the summer season. According to the weather management team, there was supposed to be some light rain last week, but they accidentally forgot about that. To make up for it, it was decided that a downpour would be made today. As such, many Pegasi were in the sky preparing the rain clouds being instructed by Rainbow Dash. While on the ground the town's earth ponies and unicorns were taking care of the ground preparation. That meant all loose tree branches and twigs had to be removed. Rarity however seemed more interested in using her magic to create beautiful designs, rather than actually taking down the branches. Ah, simply beautiful. She said to herself, and whoever said nature couldn't be pretty. She had little time to admire her work however, as a lasso, courtesy of Applejack, brought the branch Rarity had recently predified crashing down. Applejack was, needless to say, furious. Just take the broken limbs down, Rarity. Applejack said. Don't y'all care about nothing other than predifying? Some pony has too. You are making an absolute mess of the town square, Applejack. Yeah, well, the storm's gonna make an even bigger mess if we don't prune all these loose branches so they don't tumble down on any pony. Rarity looked up at the sky as Pegasi moved more clouds in to plug the holes and block the last of the sun. I simply cannot imagine why the Pegasus ponies would schedule a dreadful downpour this evening and ruin what could have been a glorious sunny day. On Rare, you heard the reports, Naruto interjected, because of the lack of rain the previous week they need to make it up. Right now the town can't afford any of its crops not being watered. Besides, I'm sure it won't be made. Oh, no. Rarity began to complain. My wonderfully styled mane shall be ruined. You should have hurried up and finished the job already. Applejack said as the prissy unicorn cried out and tried to duck every raindrop that came her way. It's coming down too fast. Help me. Rarity pleaded. Over there, Naruto called out as he took notice of a nearby picnic table. Applejack looked to each side for shelter, locating only a picnic table. There. Hunker down to your heart's content whilst I finish things. Rarity ran across the square, but suddenly skid to a stop by the table, which had a sizable puddle underneath. Ooh. No. What now? Applejack asked as she and Naruto joined her. I'd prefer not to get my shoes muddy. You're going to have to make a choice, Rare, your mane or your shoes. Applejack grunted disgustedly. There is just no pleasing you, is there? Everything's gotta be just so. Well, and how does muddying myself serve any useful purpose? Rarity countered. Y'all wouldn't know useful if it came up and bit you. Rarity gave a laugh. That doesn't even make any sense. Does so? Does not. Will you two focus for a minute? Naruto snapped, this isn't exactly solving anything. Despite the reaction their bickering drew from the blonde, the two mares simply glared at each other. Rarity was the first to break the silence. What say we go our separate ways before one of us says something she will regret? I reckon y'all are gonna say something you'll regret first. Naruto groaned as he face-palmed. Strong personalities like AJ and Rarity were inevitably going to clash, especially considering how they were opposites in nearly everything. On the contrary, I believe it shall most certainly be you who says something you will regret first. I'm not saying anything. Nor am I. Y'all just be on your way, then. After you. They slowly backed away from each other in opposite directions, neither taking their eyes off the other the whole time. Don't you two think you're being a bit? Naruto's voice was muffled by the sudden crack of lightning, and they were back where they started with a cry of fear and nearly smothering the blonde in their embrace. I miss the days when I wasn't the voice of reason. Naruto lamented, thinking back to his youth and realized this is how Kakashi must have felt when dealing with him and Sasuke. Perhaps we should all stick together for now and find some shelter. Rarity suggested. Uchiha. Applejack agreed as the storm continued to intensify. Perhaps we should. And fast. Look, Twilight's home is closest to us. We need to make our way there. He suggested as the weather began to kick up. Something didn't seem quite right, the weather seemed to be picking up rather quickly. Thankfully Twilight had been on the lookout, having factored in that at least Applejack would need shelter, considering the distance of Sweet Apple Acres from the town. While Naruto and Rarity were happy to stroll on and Applejack seemed hesitant. "Whoa, Nelly," she said. "Is inside a tree really the best place to be in a lightning storm?" "It is if you have a magical lightning rod protecting your home, like I do," the bookish pony replied. "Come on in." Rarity gave a happy sigh. "We are most grateful for your invitation." She then looked worriedly over her shoulder as Applejack stepped in, muddy boots and all. "Thank you kindly for your hospitality," she said before being stopped by Rarity, who then pointed down to the 4 spattered appendages. Do be a polite house guest and go wash up, please, won't you?" Applejack snarled to herself. "If I gotta spend one more second with that fuzzbudget Rarity today, I can't be held responsible for what I'm gonna do. Twilight, mind if I use your bathroom to clean up?" "Sure, you remember where it is, right?" she asked as Naruto nodded and strolled right to his destination. Meanwhile, Twilight was in quite a perky mood. "Some storm, huh?" she said. "The Pegasus ponies sure have outdone themselves this time. I hope you, Naruto, and Applejack don't have any trouble getting home." "It may indeed be a problem," Rarity answered. "Well, you're welcome to stay if need be. Spike is away in Canterlot on royal business. I'm home all alone tonight." Suddenly, she gave a happy gasp. "You and Applejack should totally sleep over." Twilight clapped her hooves at this. "We'll have a slumber party. I've always wanted one of those." The suggestion caught Rarity off guard for a second before she started trying to put together something resembling a coherent response. "Oh. Goodness, I do believe I have another engagement scheduled for this evening that completely slipped my mind until just now." She gave a fake chuckle. "Oh, silly me, I can't possibly stay here all night." She then added under her breath, "with Applejack." Taking a quick look over the bookshelves, Twilight levitated one of the uppermost volumes from its resting place and down to her before passing it on to Rarity. The cover showed a couple of pillows. Slumber 101. All you've ever wanted to know about slumber parties but were afraid to ask. Rarity read the title. "This is my own personal copy," a proud and happy Twilight stated. "It's a fantastic reference guide. You should see the table of contents. I've been waiting for a chance to use it and today's the day. This is going to be so great." "Yes, great." She managed the best polite laugh she can and then turned her gaze to a window through which Applejack can be seen wrestling with a garden hose. She eventually gets the water going, only to have it spray her in the face and knock her hat off. "Hey Twilight, do you have any hot cocoa? I'm still kind of chilly and with no spare clothes to change into it didn't seem to make sense to take a shower, so I just hung up my shirt to dry." Twilight, upon seeing Naruto shirtless, quickly averted her eyes with a twinge of pink on her cheeks. Rarity all the while was taking in his form as her cheeks took a deep color of scarlet as she continued appreciating what she was seeing. "Sure, I can get some started." Tearing her eyes off the blonde, Rarity realized she had an excuse. "Naruto. Naruto is here and we certainly can't have him here for a sleepover. It wouldn't be proper." "What? Like a sleepover or something?" he asked as Twilight nodded. "Yeah, when I was still a filly and before I took up the belief that friends were just a distraction, I always wanted to have a sleepover. I never been to one either, to be honest," Naruto admitted as Twilight looked up at the blonde in surprise. She couldn't believe it, Naruto seemed to be like some sort of friendship expert. "I have no interest in the makeup part or talking about boys, but I'd be happy to do any of the neutral activities. Hey, for all we know it might prove interesting." What followed was Twilight letting out one of the cutest little squeals of excitement Naruto ever witnessed. A bit of time passed when Applejack had finishing cleaning up her boots, retrieved her hat, and was entering the second story room in the library. However, she was now tracking water across the floor instead of mud. A nearby mop was covered in a blue aura and it came to life and started to clean up after Applejack. Just as she looked ahead, she pulled in a sharp gasp, her eyes going wide and her tail briefly standing up of its own accord. "What in tarnation?" she gasped as she saw Twilight and Rarity with a beauty treatment smeared on their faces and the latter was slathering on some more. Naruto meanwhile was sitting opposite of Rarity with her feet in his lap as he was massaging them. "Now wait just a golden minute. You make me wash the mud off my hooves, but it's okay for y'all to have mud all over your faces. This mud is nothing like the one you washed off, you know," said Chronicle. "Yeah, silly," Rarity answered as a content moan escaped her lips. Having Naruto learn massage technique from Aloe and Lotus was definitely one of her most brilliant ideas. While he was far from as experienced as the Spa sisters, lacking both their knowledge and experience, he made an adequate substitute in exhausting times like this. This is called a mud mask. It's to refresh and rejuvenate your complexion. We're giving each other makeovers. Twilight added giddily as she levitated the book past herself and towards Applejack. We have to do it. It says so in the book. The open tome reached Applejack and she read through it. Slumber 101. Everything you. She cut herself off with a sudden grimace as Twilight seemed to be readying up a face mask just for her. Oh, hey, heh. Would you look at the time? I gotta skedaddle on home quick, I'm powerful late for something good night. She began to run off, but yelped and beat a hasty retreat when a fresh bolt of lightning cracked the sky. Her startled and fearful expression then gave way to a shaky smile after a moment. Or maybe I'll sit here for a spell. Twilight clapped in glee. Hooray, slumber party. The earth pony's unease is interrupted when a hoofload of mud mask was thrown onto her face and Rarity rubbed it in. Bleck. She then got a cucumber slice slapped onto each eye. What in the world is this for? Rarity gave a weary sigh. To reduce the puffiness around one's eyes, of course. Puffiness, schmuffiness. Applejack scoffed as she pulled them into her mouth with her tongue and gulped them down. That's good eatin'. Rarity just aimed a vexed stare her way as Chronicle resisted to laugh. Correct me if mom wrong, but I thought fellers and fillies don't have slumber parties together. Not like we can help it, besides, Twilight's never had a slumber party and we don't want to take that experience from her. Meanwhile, Twilight continued to read from the guide, now having propped it to a stand as she giggled. Isn't this exciting? We'll do everything by the book, with a tweak here or there to compensate for Naruto, and that will make my slumber party officially fun. Did you hear that, Applejack? Rarity said to the farm mare as the latter tried to scrape her face clean. You certainly would not want to do anything that would ruin Twilight's very first slumber party, would you? Having finished massaging Rarity's feet, Naruto got up to go wash his hands. Of course not. Applejack ground out between clenched teeth. And you wouldn't either, I reckon. So do we have an agreement? You betcha. Applejack then spit on one front hoof and offered it to shake. As expected, Rarity was horrified at this. Oh, gross. She cried out as her face scrunched up in disgust. You know, there's messy, and there's just plain rude. You know, there's fussy, and there's just plain getting on my nerves. Fortunately, I can get along with any pony, no matter how difficult she may be. Oh, yeah? Well, I'm the get-alongest pony you're ever gonna meet. That's not even a word. Suddenly, Twilight popped up between them and hugged them both. This is gonna be the bestest slumber party ever. Yay. Her two friends gave a wooden yay in response as they gave each other dirty looks from the corners of their eyes. Naruto had returned just in time to see Twilight's reaction. The mare was just too adorable for her own good. Seeing as the next part was the makeup and styling portion of the sleepover, Naruto excused himself to go make something to eat. So how are you getting along over there, Applejack? Rarity asked. Just fine, Rarity. The farm pony replied wearily. This is so awesome. Twilight said with a giggle as she levitated the book and a quill over to herself. Makeovers, check. In a flash, all the curlers disappeared in a flash, leaving the two guests to trade a thin smile. In another flash, a confused and startled Naruto was there. Ooh. It says here we have to tell ghost stories. Who wants to go first? Me. Applejack then spoke in a hushed tone. I'd like to tell y'all the terrifying tale of the prissy ghost who drove every pony crazy with her unnecessary neatness. She aimed a few of these words at Rarity, then waved her front hooves about while making ghostly moaning sounds for effect. I'm sure y'all are familiar with that one. I should have stayed home. I felt it in my bones, but I ignored it. Why did I ignore it? Naruto mumbled to himself. Never heard of it, said Rarity. But I have a much better one. She then spoke in an ominous manner. It's the horrifying story of the messy, inconsiderate ghost who irritated every pony within 100 miles. It was obvious that this was aimed at Applejack as she added her own sound effects. That's not a real story. The farm pony replied. You made it up. It is a ghost story. They're all made up. You both are acting like fools. Now every pony just Naruto was once more cut off as a lightning strike took out all the lights, leaving everything black and eliciting gasps of fright, one of them as high as a filly's. A moment later, a firefly lantern was produced, illuminating every pony as they hunched around it. But magically enchanted how? Didn't Twilight say the tree was magically protected? How the hell did the lightning knock out the lights? Did the magic overpower the crystal which the light shined from? I've got one. Twilight eagerly volunteered. This story is called The Legend of the Headless Horse. More lightning tore through the night at the end of this. It was a dark and stormy night, just like this one. And 4 ponies were having a slumber party just like this one. Twilight's ghost story began drawing to a close. Rarity was visibly unnerved, evidently Twilight's story has gone to work on her. Applejack was doing no better. Naruto was intently listening, unaffected by the tale. Then again, having to fight a crazed alien warrior goddess that had dimension-hopping abilities, dulled your senses on what you find frightening. And just when the last pony thought she was safe, Twilight said. There, standing right behind her, just inches away, was the headless horse. There came a lightning strike, and all of a sudden Twilight had reared up before her guests with a blanket covering her head. Applejack and Rarity screamed in terror. Every pony fell quiet as Twilight then peeked out with a gotcha smile. Naruto began laughing his ass off, having no idea Twilight had it in her. That was pretty good, Twilight. Ghost story, check. Now that the danger was past, Rarity and Applejack drew apart with suspicious glances at each other. Now, who wants s'mores? Every pony moved to the kitchen. Naruto and Applejack were at the fireplace, toasting 2 marshmallows apiece, while the 2 unicorns were standing at the table. Then you place 1 marshmallow on the top of the chocolate, Rarity was explaining to Twilight. Plates of graham crackers and chocolate squares were laid out. Rarity has a nearly completed s'more on a saucer before her, missing only its top cracker, and she was levitating both that piece and all the parts for a second. And be sure it's centered, that's critical, and then carefully put another perfectly square graham cracker on the top. With that, she floated the second cracker down and squished it gently into place. And done. Ta-da. Ooh. Twilight said as the fashionista gave a soft laugh. Applejack, however, was less than enthused at Rarity's meticulous explanation. Nah, you just eat 'em. And she does so, scarfing down half the treat with a large bite as noticeable noises escaped the mouth from her cheek-bulging display. Rarity reacted to this display of bad table manners, and the burp that follows did nothing to endear her. You could at least say, excuse me. Rarity stated as she regarded the farmer with a look of distaste. I was just about to, but you interrupted me. Applejack countered. Pardon. The fastidious unicorn wasn't exactly thrilled by this. Meanwhile, Twilight was marking off in her book. S'mores, check. Now the next item of fun we have to do is truth or dare. I dare Applejack to do something carefully and neatly for a change. Immediately leaping at the opportunity, Rarity immediately suggested the action for Applejack. Oh, yeah? Well, I dare Rarity to lighten up and stop obsessing over every last little detail, for a change. Applejack countered. I think the truth of the matter is that some pony could stand to pay a little more attention to detail. Twilight watched with mild shock at this display. And I think the truth is some pony ought to quit with her fussin' so the rest of us can get things done. The slightly bewildered slumber party host then turned back to her guide and flips pages quickly with her magic. I don't think this is how the game's supposed to work. Naruto was going to step in to stop the two from fighting, but what good would it do? Rarity and Applejack were both stubborn, and it was going to take something major to knock some sense into their heads that this whole issue of theirs was silly. He only hoped that Twilight's emotions wouldn't be hurt before they realized how silly they were acting. Applejack then told Rarity, I dares you to step outside and let your precious tidy mane get ruined again. The owner of said mane shuddered in fright. You have to. Twilight clarified, Twilight. It's the rule. Ha. Fine. Rarity conceded as she skulked out, Applejack grinning wickedly after her. As there were sounds of the door opening, rain pours down, and Rarity yelping in barely contained panic, while Applejack put a hand to her mouth to stifle a guffaw. Oopsie. Can't believe I skipped that part. Just then, they heard the door close again, and there stood a very soggy Rarity, her mane and tail having lost all semblance of their usual elegant curl with her clothes soaked through. Blushing, Naruto averted his gaze at Rarity's wet look was not only appealing, but her bra was showing through the wet shirt that was clinging to her form. Applejack had a laugh as Rarity squished back into the room, but clammed up and started backing away before the latter's steady advance. Okay, I dare Applejack to play dress up in a frou-frou glittery lacy outfit. Now Applejack was the one to react badly, sucking in a sharp gasp. She threw Rarity a dirty look and walked off. A quick rustle of clothing later, she returned to the kitchen. Her light blue outfit was that of a typical fairy tale princess, complete with earrings and necklace, pink ribbons on her hooves, a tall pointed hat, and a full-length gown with a pink saddle trimmed in yellow and white. Her mane had been curled and flowers were put into it. Needless to say, she wasn't the slightest bit pleased at having to do this. Happy? Very. Rarity gave a chuckle. Do I ever get a turn? Twilight asked, but was cut off by Applejack. I dare you to enter the next rodeo when it comes to town. I dare you not to enter the next rodeo that comes to town. I dare you to not comb your mane 100 times before bed. Twilight gave a nervous smile as she levitated the book. I think we can check off truth or dare and move on. Let's see what our next fun thing is, shall we? She eyed the pages for a long moment in a puzzled manner. What does this mean? Pillow fight. Rarity, by now properly dried and styled, said, "Oh, please. I am not at all interested in participating in something so crude." She promptly caught a flying pillow with her face and spat out a few loose feathers, changing her attitude in a heartbeat. Ooh. It is on. One quick nip and head snap sends the pillow flying across the room and into Applejack's face. Shaking the feathers away, the latter kicked 3 from a pile in front of her that Twilight summoned. It was a triple bullseye. Now the fashionista kicked the pillows back across the room, missing with each one. The Farmpany countered by cinching several of them in a lasso and twirling them overhead. She then whipped them loose a salvo of 3, but Rarity used her magic to bring them to a hovering rest on either side of her. Another spell then hurled them back across the room. As pillows went flying in both directions, Twilight stood up with a look of sudden understanding. "Oh, I get it. Pillow fight. Fun." Just before 2 pillows could slam into the side of her head, Twilight stood confused. Twilight then got up and spat out some feathers that came from the pillows. "Maybe we should just call it a night and get some sleep." Rarity and Applejack found themselves having to borrow some pajamas from Twilight, to which Rarity altered with a size-changing spell. Impractical for permanent outfits, but useful enough for something like overnight wear that one would need to use say once or twice. Applejack and Rarity were sequestered to the guest room while Naruto slept on the couch in the other room. The two mares were never going to get along until they had their grievances about each other out of their system. "Keep your dirty feet on your side of the bed," Rarity whispered to Applejack. "My feet ain't dirty." They were. Considering how well you handle their hygiene, there's no telling what you missed. There ain't. See. You what? Rarity gripped the blanket with her teeth and yanked all of it to her side. "Now who's being inconsiderate?" Applejack yanked the blanket off Rarity, who glared over her shoulder and then got out of bed. "I have to make the bed again so the blanket will be right." She then butted Applejack off. "Get up." "Hey." Rarity tucked the blanket's corners neatly over the mattress and smoothed out all the folds, leaving a perfectly made bed that didn't placate Applejack in the slightest. The latter motioned to get on the bed, but Rarity waved her back. "Ah. You'll ruin it. You have to do it like this." Sitting down plot first on her pillow, she eased her hindquarters under the blanket without turning it down and eventually wound up lying on her back. "Ah. Yeah, that's not gonna happen." Applejack then jumped up, with full intent on pouncing on the bed. "Geronimo." She landed on the bed with enough force to throw both Rarity and her pillow out as the suddenly vacant half of the blanket settled over the Farmpany. "Hey." She then got up from her being thrown off. "You did that on purpose." Yeah. "Get up so I can fix it again." "Can't hear you. I'm asleep." Applejack then gave a few loud fake snores as Rarity fumed quietly for a moment, after which the irate unicorn whipped the blanket off the bed with her teeth. "Ah, ain't budgin'. You will if you want any blanket," Rarity said through her teeth. The blanket was swiftly yanked away by Applejack, leading to a tug of war. "Give it back." "I will not." "Yes, you will." "Won't." "Enough." They were cut off by Twilight, who had gotten up due to the entire racket. The two combatants slackened their pull on the blanket as the book, open, was levitated up for them to read. "It says right here that the number one thing you're supposed to do at a slumber party is have fun," Twilight said as she then slammed the book shut and dropped it. "And thanks to you too, I can't check that off." Applejack dropped her end. "I've been trying my darnedest to get along." Rarity dropped hers. "No, it is I who have been trying my best." "No, it was me." "No, it was I." "Me." I hope you're happy," the upset unicorn snapped at them. "Both of you. You've ruined my very first slumber party. The makeover, the s'mores, truth or dare, the pillow fight. Let's just go to bed and forget the whole thing." The look on Twilight's face was absolutely heartbroken. "Good night every pony," she mumbled as she went off to her room. Both Rarity and Applejack were rather ashamed at what their actions caused. They were so angry and petulant to each other they completely ignored what their actions were doing to Twilight. "I'll talk to Twilight," Naruto volunteered as he followed after the unicorn. Hoping that the other two mares would have a heart-to-heart and that he made the right decision. Naruto came across the saddened Twilight, whose expression was so sad he had to stop himself from giving her a hug. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that, Twi. I just don't understand why they were acting that way. All of us are friends, right? Why would they be so mean each other?" Naruto sighed as he stretched out his arms before placing them on his knees. "Sometimes you lose sight of things when you become emotional. I'm sorry this happened to you, Twilight. I could have stepped in, but I was hoping AJ and Rare would hash out their issues. Sometimes it's good to let ponies hash out issues on their own, but the unfortunate result can lead to others being hurt. You can have the best intentions, but things don't always work out. Despite their issues with each other, I'm sure they didn't mean to ruin the slumber party for you. Hopefully this is the experience that knocks them back to their senses. If you had decided to talk with them, what would you have done?" Naruto looked back to Twilight, who was looking at the stallion expectantly, waiting for the answer of her inquiry. I'm not sure if simply talking would have solved their deep-seated issues. Both of them are strong, stubborn, and proud in whom they are, which makes them being opposites in so many things an easy issue to butt heads with. Rarity cares about beauty and cleanliness and Applejack working and freedom. One would be horrified at the thought of a trek through mud and the other would just wear a determined grin. Normally you'll need a strong incident in order to snap them out of it. Anyway, I'm pretty sure the two of them are waiting out there for their chance to apology. He finished with a grin. I'll send them in. He said as he got off the bed and went to the door. The sudden jolt from the other side of the door showed that the two of them had been eavesdropping. She's all yours, Naruto answered as the two of them tried to play off what happened as they went to apology to Twilight for their behavior and dragging her into their spat. Naruto went downstairs and began checking out the condition of the storm. What followed was the sound of thunder, and then not too long after a tree had crashed through a section of the library, exposing it to the elements. The trio of mares ran down and gasped at the destruction. You see? Applejack scolded a chastened Rarity. That's why we needed to take down all those loose branches in town, not spiffy 'em up. But out of my way, missy. Applejack dashed to the window. Time's a wastin'. She pushed it open with one hand and her lasso began to spin. Wait. Stop. Don't. No waitin', no stoppin', doin'. And with that, she let the rope fly and caught the loose section at its top. And that, my friends, is what we call gettin' her done. As she then yanked down on her end, the entire leafy expanse of the snapped-off piece tumbled squarely through the window. The foliage was expansive enough to nearly fill the loft, and Applejack wound up hanging over the balcony by the rope still in her hands. Rarity was crying out from the wind-blown mess at the bookshelves, which have been reduced to a scramble of open volumes, torn-out pages, and broken junk. She was holding an open book over her head to shelter herself, in spite of the fact that no wind was blowing inside anymore. I tried to tell you it would come crashing down in here. The Fascionist to warn as Applejack climbed up the steps. Well, you shoulda tried harder. Applejack's eyes then popped upon seeing that Rarity was trying to gather up the bits of furniture. At the other end of the fallen timber, Twilight poked her head up dizzily and shook it clear. Still dazed, she was helped up by Naruto. I'm mighty sorry, Twilight. It's not okay. There's a giant tree branch in the middle of my bedroom. Twilight, can you create a barrier to stop all the wind and rain from pouring in? I can, but if I make the barrier too small it will keep the tree immobilized. I will have to extend its range so it can be removed, but I won't be able to keep it up all night. Is there any supplies we can use to make a makeshift wall or such? Naruto asked her. Down in the basement. There's still some left from when the library was expanded a few days ago. Twilight answered as her horn began to glow. Slowly a crest-like image formed and began to grow in size as Twilight began to extend it outwards towards the hole the tree made. She began to form a protective shield to protect them from the storm. He then turned to Rarity, who was putting books back on the shelves, and saw that her priorities were also skewed. What in tarnation are y'all doing over there? Applejack asked her, seeing it too. Cleaning up this mess some pony made. Who was that again? Oh, right, that's you. Applejack grimaced for a moment, pulled her head into the leaves, and put it up behind Twilight. We gotta do something. We need to come up with a way to get it out of here without causing any more damage. Look, I'm going to get the supplies from the basement. Applejack and Rarity, we need you to figure out how we're going to move that tree. Naruto suggested as he went downstairs to get the tools. Applejack used her rope to pull on one section, then bucked at it and stomped before diving back in. A moment later, she looked out across the room. Rarity, for Pony's sake. Stop sweating the small stuff and help me get rid of this thing. Rarity ignored her as she continued shelving. I said, hustle over here and help me. Come on, Rarity. We can fix up the books later. Again, there was no response. At this moment, Applejack strained against the trunk's weight and/or her own attitude. When she spoke next, her voice has lost some of its angry edge. Look. I'm sorry, alright. What was that? Rarity asked. Said I'm sorry. Shoulda listened to you when you noticed where this here branch would end up. Your annoying attention to detail woulda saved us from this whole mess. But right now, you need to stop being so dang fussy picking up all those little things and help me move the one big thing in here that actually matters. There was no immediate response. Please. Taking a long moment to think, Rarity tossed her head to get the book off it and moaned uncertainly before a determined smile came over her face. Let's do this. When Naruto returned, the two of them discussed their plan to move the tree. A few seconds later, they put their plan into action. Rarity was now back at the bookshelves and she concentrates deeply and unleashing a burst from her horn. In two swift flashes, the leafy limbs became topiaries similar to the ones she made prior to the storm, but with a wider assortment of shapes. They floated before her and settled gently into the suddenly cleared floor space. At the window, one stub of trunk still hung on the sill. Applejack, having finally put her hat back on, was set to buck it out, but a stern look from Rarity changed her mind. Both ponies are now filthy with twigs and tree sap. Instead of using leg power, Applejack caught a small side branch in her hand while Naruto helped heave the other over the side. Gathering the pieces of plank, Naruto and Applejack went to work mending the hole with the planks the former had gathered from the placement. Mending the hole took no time as Rarity floated the nails up to the two as they quickly patched up the destruction. Rarity smiled approvingly as Naruto nailed the final plank, to which Twilight let out a sigh of relief. Keeping a spell of that level for so long was rather draining. Rarity then got a full look at the splatters that have ruined her own impeccable grooming. Oh, I look awful. Applejack thought hard for a moment before getting a brainstorm. She then took up some cucumber slices and put them on Rarity's eyes. Better. Rarity smiled and laughed softly. Thanks. She reached forward blindly with a hoof, trying to touch Applejack's cheek. The latter leaned forward to put herself in the right place, and the two shared a hug. I am sorry, Applejack. You were right, removing branches and tending to the trees was a far more important issue than my efforts to add a little culture to them. I would hate to think if something like this were to happen to any pony else. It's fine, as long as you understand the importance of it. Hours later they all began to play the next game in the book's list. 20 questions. They were sitting on the floor and laughing, and the unicorn mares had their curlers in. Is it bigger than a barn? Applejack questioned. Is it smaller than a saddle? Rarity added. Twilight giggled again. No. Only 3 of your 20 questions left. Applejack sighed. We're never gonna guess what you're thinking of. It could be anything. Are we getting warmer? Rarity asked Dot. Why? Is it too cold in here for you? Twilight asked. I can turn up the heat. She means, are we getting any closer with our guesses? Applejack clarified. Oh. No. And that technically counted as a question, so only 2 more left. Twilight said. Is it? Applejack said, then in rapid fire, a 6-legged pony with a purple polka-dotted mane and shootin' stars coming out of his eyes. Who flies through the air all over the world to hide magic sparkly eggs. Rarity finished in the same manner. That's it. Twilight exclaimed with a look of enthusiasm. It is? Both of the guessers asked with a look of confusion. No. Twilight simply stated. She pointed to something at the bedroom window. It's a telescope. Really, girls, but it was just so nice to see you two finally getting along. I wanted you to be able to win together. Twilight said, and the 2 guessers laughed, proving her point. See? We could have been having fun like this all along. If only some pony hadn't been so persnickety. Applejack snarked. Well, maybe she wouldn't have been if some pony else hadn't been so sloppy. Rarity snarked back. They traded sidelong, riled up glances for a moment and then smiled again. Sorry for being such a pain in the patty. Oh, no, I'm sure I was much worse. That's kind of you to say, but I'm the one who's sorry. Oh, I'm much sorrier than you are. Or not. Or two. Or not. Or two. Or not. Or two. Both of them began to laugh and Twilight popped up between them, the curlers gone from her mane. I declare my first slumber party a success. The 3 of them high-fived and gave out a yeah. Before laughing again. Twilight then levitated her book. Have fun, check. There was another round of laughter as it was closed. Naruto returned back from the bathroom. Alright, so whose turn is it? Early morning at the main room, the table was set aside as stacks of books and pillows as well as the topiaries filled the floor. Now take 2 steps to your left. Rarity curlers off her head instructed Applejack as she walked into the obstacle course, her motions hampered by the cucumber slices on her eyes. No, my left. Applejack tried to correct herself in her walk. Well, which is it? She then stumbled into the books, toppling them over. Whoa. When she stood up from the collapse, she had lost the slices but gained a pillow on her head. She gave a smile as Rarity walked to her. That mess is your fault, not mine. Both of them began to laugh. Sorry. Meanwhile, Twilight was compassing a report at a work table. Dear Princess Celestia, she began. It's hard to believe that 2 ponies that seem to have so little in common could ever get along. But I found out that if you embrace each other's differences, you just might be surprised to discover a way to be friends after all. She then floated the quill away from the scroll and addressed herself across the room. So, who's up for another slumber party tomorrow night? She was answered with a pair of pillows being flung into her grinning face. How about a week from Thursday? A few more pillows were thrown. Oh. How about 2 weeks from Saturday? There was laughter from her guests. A month from now? Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at what was going on. Yeah, I think you might want to wait a while before having another one. Naruto currently found himself on the floor of the Golden Oaks library with Pinkie Pie's face half buried into his neck. Good morning, Twilight. Pinkie finally greeted, her face still buried in his neck. And good morning to you, Neri. She looked up into Naruto's eyes and smiled. Pinkie, could you please get off of me? Naruto pleaded as he mentally concentrated on not reacting to Pinkie's form on top of him. What's wrong, Neri? Am I not pretty? I thought all the colts liked it when a pretty mare throws themselves at them. She continued her teasing with a sultry tone. Naruto suddenly found it difficult to breathe. Twilight cleared her throat. I'm sorry, but could you two please not do anything on my library floor that would result in me having to see a specialist? I like to avoid such oddities if that's possible. Okie dokie, Pinkie Pie rolled backwards into a handstand and completed the maneuver right side up. As always, Pinkie Pie's smile was beautiful and rather infectious. Pinkie Pie skipped her way over to the table and took a seat. I'm ready whenever you two are. Alright, first we'll start with your full name and any nicknames you may have. Twilight started as a large grin formed on Pinkie Pie's face. Well, my name is Pinkamena Diane Pie, but nobody calls me that, so just Pinkie Pie. I'm also known as the party pony or Pinkie. She proudly answered. Per usual, Twilight wrote down the information as they continued on to the next questions. Alright, now what is your date of birth and age? I was born 2002 AD on July 23rd, and I'm 22 years old. She answered as Twilight continued her writing. Alright, now we're going to ask you about your height and weight. We can put down the last time you had those measured, and for the next interview you can come back with the exact numbers. Naruto told her. I'm 5'8" and 158 pounds of fun. She answered with her usual warm grin. So what other questions you got? I'm an open book. Well, now it's my turn to ask you some questions. I can only assume Celestia has me asking these questions for the sake of gifting you with an outfit or such for your services to the crowd. He began, keeping his face as straight and stoic as possible. With each interview he was beginning to doubt the validity of the questioning itself. With her hands on the table, Pinkie Pie easily vaulted up and over the table and slid across, plopping onto Naruto's lap. If you wanted to see how big they were, Neri, all you had to do was ask. She teased him with a playful husky purr. Naruto's cheeks darkened, and to which Twilight mirrored, but found herself unable to look away. Her top revealed those warm and ample sacs of flesh as the lighting in the room gave her coat a shiny look. Raising her hands to cup under her breasts, she began to motion them up and down. I would say about 40. A lot of the other fillies say my boobs are big because of all the sugar I eat. That is scientifically and biologically incorrect. Twilight sparkled loudly rebuttal as if the notion of Pinkie Pie's statement offended her. There are no foods that will help the breasts or buttocks increase in size. The build of your body is determined by genetics, and there is no existing diet for ponies that can change that. It is impossible to increase your breast size by anything except breast augmentation surgery. You may, however, be able to increase the size of your buttocks through regular exercise targeted to that area. Upon seeing Naruto and Pinkie Pie staring at her, Twilight averted her eyes and hastily added, the study of nutrition on the equine's body was the subject of a paper I did years ago, and I like to be rather thorough. Right, Naruto added as he cleared his throat and looked down at Pinkie. Pinkie, can you please get off me? Pinkie pouted but complied, to which Naruto was thankful and hoped she didn't notice the thick bulge that had been growing from Pinkie's jostling around. Oh, well, I'm up, why don't I show you my cutie mark? Pinkie suggested as she began pulling down the top of her jean skirt. The full display of her cutie mark was presented just above the curve of her ass, 3 balloons, 1 yellow, while the other 2 were blue. 3 balloons, just above the buttocks area, 1 yellow, the other 2 blue with the second blue, one hanging lower than the other ones. He informed Twilight, quickly averting his eyes once he realized they were lingering a bit longer than necessary. Twilight couldn't help but wonder what the exact nature of the relationship between her two friends were. Was Pinkie Pie really just teasing, or was this her way of showing interest? Such behavior was often more attributed to ponies with loose morals, but seeing as far as she knew, Pinkie Pie hadn't presented the blonde with a flower, or it wasn't brought up in any of their conversations, this was simply some form of foreplay between the two. Twilight, you there? Naruto asked, snapping the mare out of her inquiry. Yeah, sorry. She quickly straightened up her papers and began with the next question. What is your occupation? I'm the assistant baker at Sugarcube Corner, and I'm also a professional party planner. I handle nearly all of Ponyville's parties. I handle birthday parties, surprise parties, dinner parties, tea parties, reception, block parties, costume parties, graduation parties, baby showers, welcome parties, housewarming parties, pre-parties. After parties, Pinkie excitedly chattered and listed off the kinds of parties. Then they moved on to the next question. Now about your education. I graduated from the Culinary Institute of Equestria in Las Pegasus. Oh, I remember all the bright and pretty lights and all the hustling and bustling. Then there were all the games with cards and stuff and all the dressing up. We really need you to focus, Pinks. Naruto interrupted her before she could move on another tangent. Anyway, he paused and murmured something. We need your measurements. Now why didn't you just ask for my measurements instead of my boob size differently, silly? Naruto opened his mouth and then promptly closed it upon realizing he had no retort. After another half hour of questioning they finally got around to the last part of the bio, which was questioning her place of birth and her immediate family. Family name, occupation. Father igneous rock farmer. Mother cloudy quartz rock farmer. Grandmother granite rock retired. Aunt butter pie baker. Older sister mud pie petrologist. Younger sister marble pie student. Younger sister limestone pie student. Well, that was really fun. Pinkie said as she stretched her arms backward in yet the atypical Pinkie Pie manner of flexibility. Everything seems to be in order. If nothing comes up in your schedule, will 1 month from now be ideal for the next interview? Twilight asked as Pinkie nodded. Yep, she answered. Anyway, I have to go. I have to go pick up the stock for the bakery. See you later, Twilight, Nary. She bid them farewell with her usual exuberance. Naruto all the while was face planting on the desk and wondering how in Equestria he was going to survive these interviews if they were going to keep going like this. Come on, Fluttershy, you can do this. She softly coached herself as she found herself standing on the other side of the street from Naruto's home. Sure enough, walking the trail was none other than Naruto, who was coming in from his early morning training. Out of reflex, Fluttershy used one of her large wings to cover herself when he began looking around. Naruto caught sight of the Pegasus and gave her a wave. Taking notice of what she was doing, he couldn't help but notice how cute she was. Between her adorable squeaks and demure demeanor, it was hard not to notice. So lost in his thoughts he didn't notice his intense gaze caused a blush to deepen on her cheeks. He took notice of what she was wearing. A lovely floral summer dress that showed off her legs and form, and from what he could see her wings were as vibrant and clean as always. Seeing as she was a caretaker of sorts, it made sense for Fluttershy to be rather hygienic. Peeking over her wing, Fluttershy took in the stallion's body language, having dealt with a lot of bullies because of her shy behavior. Not to mention being the daughter of a military pony, Fluttershy found herself a target on multiple fronts. Both the negative experiences from her childhood and her positive interactions with animals had helped her develop a keen sense of another pony's intent. Her cheeks continued its coloring once she realized the stallion was staring right at her. For a moment she felt like she was going to faint. Swallowing, Fluttershy decided to steel her resolve. Unable to keep eye contact, she made her way over to the stallion while doing her best to avoid stumbling and making a joke of herself. Naruto had come to a stop and waited for Fluttershy to approach him. He took in her appearance and quite frankly he now understood the statement of an angel in a sinful body. Naruto hoped that Fluttershy was going to act positively to the action he was about to do. She had been opening up to him and he was hoping that slowly but surely he could help her out of her shell. Making the first move, he reached out and brought her into an affectionate hug. Hey Shy, how was your trip? Fluttershy felt herself freeze at the contact. She took a moment to start breathing and allow herself to calm down. It's okay. It's Naruto. He won't hurt you. He won't hurt you. She softly chanted to herself as she accepted the embrace. So warm. She added as an afterthought. Good morning, Naruto, she answered, wrapping her arms around him to return the embrace. It was wonderful. After the Nightmare Moon incident, her mother insisted on seeing her, so Fluttershy made a trip to Cloudsdale for the weekend. The hug soon ended, much to the mayor's disappointment. How are you parents doing? He asked as Fluttershy started to return to her normal color. They're doing well. Both of them are doing their parts in hunting down the criminals that escaped during the incident, so both of them are going to be rather busy the next few months. Either way, it must have been good seeing your mom again anyway. You here for a visit? Well, actually I was hoping you could come with me to gather some herbs and plants from the Everfree forest, if that's okay with you. Sure, Fluttershy, are any of the others coming with us? He asked. No, they're all busy with helping in the relief efforts, and I thought that maybe I could help with some herbs. For the first time she looked directly at Naruto, though once she realized that her gaze was more than obvious, she quickly turned away with a blush. Oh, that's okay I guess. Would you like to come in for anything to eat or have you already eaten? It's fine, I ate before I came, I didn't want to impose. The warm smile formed on Naruto's face. You could never impose. Let me grab a few things and I'll be ready to join you. He said as he opened the door and let her inside. It won't take long. He promised as he trailed upstairs. Fluttershy patiently waited as she looked around. She had been over to Naruto's home once or twice, but she never took time to explore as she never stayed over long enough. Alright, are you ready to go? He asked, walking down with a different pair of clothing than what he was wearing earlier. It was a mended version of the training outfit he asked Rarity to make when he first met her. While physically no different than any other outfit he commissioned to the seamstress for this purpose, this one held sentimental value for him. Yes. The two walked side by side as Naruto filled her in on some of the events she had missed. It was a shame Fluttershy had to go out of town, as her animal expertise would have been rather invaluable during the Ursa Minor attack. Besides himself, the only other pony who considered going near the Everfree forest was Fluttershy. Ironically enough considering her timid nature. As such they went into trips to the forest twice prior to now, so Fluttershy could expand her collection of herbs. Even to this day most of the ponies were still wary of the forest. Rumors and stories of what Naruto and the bearers in the forest had done of course, slowly began to go into the territory of extravagance. And again, considering they faced Timberwolves and a Manticore not to mention Nightmare Moon and her forces, the embellished tales themselves were hard pressed to match the feat of facing the Moonalicorn in battle. So what plants are we looking for? She began in her usual quiet manner. You remember the usual herbs correct? Yeah, Angelica, Basil, Elderflower and such right? He asked, listing the herbs off the top of his head. Correct, but there are also 4 other plants we need to find. Knotgrass, a plant with magical properties and used in a lot of potions. They can only be harvested a few times a year and are pretty valuable. Knotgrass is a rather popular export to the nation of Zebrica and how I make a good deal of my income. During our journey to the tower I noticed several of the plants and herbs, so we'll find them a little deeper into the forest. When Naruto had first met her he wondered if being the town's veterinarian really did allow her to afford such a living, until he learned she regularly sold plants and herbs to supplement her income. Next is Gertie-root and it looks like a green onion. It tastes rather nasty, but it wards off certain skin affections. Fluttershy then let out a gasp and took notice of green onions a few feet away from them. There's some right there. She pointed out as the two of them went over to collect the plant. Pulling out some gloves from the basket she bought, the two of them put on the gloves before carefully removing the onions from their place. Fluttershy warned him that several of these plants were rather toxic and could be absorbed through the skin if one wasn't cautious enough. Then there is gillyweed, a magical plant that can be found by water sources. I think there might be some near that river we encountered, and lastly the snargleif, a plant that looks like a gnarled stump and is hidden with vines, and I hear it takes more than one pony to harvest because of its dangerous thorns. We have to look for green pulsating pods about the size of grapefruits. They continued their journey when they came across an animal here or there. Every so often a creature would approach and using her talent, Fluttershy would chat with them. It always amazes me whenever you do that. He finally spoke up after a good deal of silence. It's nothing really. You say that, but unlike a lot of other talents being good with animals is rather one of the more unique ones. Well, Fluttershy began. I suppose it comes natural to me. After all no pony would be able to have and get along with their pets if they couldn't communicate with them to some degree. I suppose you're right. He replied as they kept going. The two continued on this time in silence as they kept a lookout for the plants and herbs. Every so often they would stop to pick up some plants. Finally, the two came across a large clearing hidden by the foliage of the Everfree's large tree. Despite the fact that it was the afternoon the light within the forest always seemed darker than one would normally perceive. They arrived to the river and began picking some of the gillyweed. So what else do we need? He asked when suddenly a loud and harsh roar echoed from behind the tree line. From behind them appeared none other than a manticore. Naruto immediately moved himself between Fluttershy and the manticore. Stand back shy, I won't let this creature hurt you. Naruto quickly drew out the machete that he had strapped to his back. While it wasn't a weapon he was proficient with, some of these creatures had tough hides he didn't wish to damage his hand on. No. Don't. Fluttershy loudly cried out to him as she moved in between the stunned Naruto and the snarling beast. He doesn't mean any harm. She said as she walked over to the creature. Isn't that right Manfred? She cooed to the creature as she approached it and placed a gentle hoof on its head. The manticore responded instantly with a low grumble of appreciation, closing its eyes in bliss. Manfred? Naruto echoed with a slack jaw. Yes, don't you remember when he had that horrible spell cast on him? She asked as the realization of this being the same manticore. So, this Manfred is the same manticore? I always did wonder what happened to him. Naruto asked as he leaned against one of the trees. He left shortly after my papa showed up. He's not too keen on dealing with large crowds, poor fella had me worried for a week before he showed up again. Well, I'm glad he's okay. Naruto honestly answered. From the account he had got from the mares he really helped them out. Should we continue our journey? Well, okay. She gave the manticore a final pat on the head before walking back towards Naruto. Have you found any pony to spend time with? Fluttershy couldn't help but gasp at her sudden boldness. I mean since you live on your own not that there's anything wrong with that. Fluttershy profusely apologized, then did that cute little furrowing on her face when she was disappointed in herself. For a few seconds Naruto was stunned that Fluttershy looked like she was trying to start a conversation before he replied. It's fine shy, I know what you're trying to say. I don't have any other living relatives. I'm the last of my line. I'm sorry. There's nothing to apologize for. Does it hurt to think about my family sometimes? Yeah, it kind of does, but then I remember I have some amazing friends, and that helps me get through those rather tough and lonely days. So don't ever feel afraid to start a conversation with me, okay? Okay. Fluttershy nodded. Finding the last of the plants they needed, the two of them began their trek out of the forest. Naruto was thankful that for once nothing crazy occurred like it usually would from incidents like this. Nearing her cottage, Naruto suggested that the two of them wash up and catch a late lunch, considering they hadn't brought anything to eat for the journey. After making sure all her animals had food left out for them as well as water, Fluttershy agreed to the invitation for lunch. It was during their walk to find a restaurant Fluttershy began to notice something. It was the body language of the other mares in town. The reason why she was picking up on it was rather obvious, seeing as this was the first time Naruto and Fluttershy were in town together. While the Summer Sun Festival did see an increase of male traffic into the town, the ration was still heavily in the favor of mare residents. There were only slim pickings in regards to the stallions in town. Those considered at the top and the most desired were the likes of Big Macintosh, secluded to Sweet Apple Acres, and Time Turner, who was always on the move. Then there were those like Caramel, who had a mare friend like Sassaflash, who had no interest in starting a herd anytime soon, or like the Cakes, who had a monogamous marriage. What followed after that were the like of Bulk Biceps, whose bulging muscles and general loudness made him difficult to approach, and unfortunately enough his tiny wings immediately perpetuated the idea of him being less than ideally equipped, along with Thunderlane, known for his lechery and being on the lazy side. So when Naruto came into town, he turned more than a few heads. At first it was only a few mares, considering his rather scraggy and scrawny state he appeared in town in. Just because the number of males were few didn't mean they didn't have standards after all, but then the months had passed, and thanks to the training and his rich diet, Naruto began to develop a strong and healthy physique, and that drew a lot of attention. There was also the fact he was rather friendly and seen interacting positively with many of the town's coats and fillies, which was a plus. Then there was also the fact he seemed to play hard to get, which to this day, most didn't realize that until recently, and even to a good extent, Naruto was actually painfully clueless to the equine body language, often missing many of the cues of interest directed at him, and was not in fact playing hard to get. In fact, you had to be pretty damn blatant to the point of admitting you were in love with him to get a clue. A shame he had finally picked up the cues of human women's emotions, only to end up in an equine society. Fluttershy, on the other hand, was not as clueless as the blonde when it came to the attention of the other mares. Despite having a non-existent love life, she was taught many things when it came to reading ponies and learning information about them from her mother. And in typical Fluttershy fashion, she linked the action to the little creatures she loved so much. The mares about town were like hungry mice eyeing fresh berries or nuts. Contrary to popular belief, mice actually weren't all that fond of cheese, considering how their teeth were suited for tougher food, and the soft substance of cheese wasn't enough to fill the vermin or provided all the nutrients they needed. By the way they were sizing him up, it was apparent that some of them were already making plans to make their move. After all, single stallions were considered fair game, and it was usually always a race to become the stallion's significant other, or depending on where you live, more commonly alpha mare. After the end of her observation, two thoughts came to mind. The first was the nice and atypical sweet part of Fluttershy that concluded they were nice mares looking for love and took notice that Naruto was a nice stallion. The other and more unusual thought was quick but just as strong. Spending that day with Naruto was after all the first step and exploring the nature of her feelings for the blonde, and she wasn't going to lose without a fight. Chapter end. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Peace out.